For this part of the lesson, what I want you to do is I want you to just watch really carefully. If we were in class, I would ask you to write down notes in your response journal. If you do have your response journal or your ELA notebook at home or a piece of paper that you would like to take notes on with, that would be great. If not, that is okay as well. Please just make sure you're watching carefully. All right? So here we're going to jot down some notes on linking words and phrases. And what I want us to carefully notice are the linking words and phrases that show us that we are comparing and that we are contrasting. And we're going to find them in this essay on handout 7A, and we're going to jot them down here. All right. So again, reading the directions carefully. Read the compare and contrast essay below. Use yellow to highlight sentences that show similarities and between Japan and the United States. Use blue to highlight differences between the two countries. Okay, so very similar to what we did last week, but now this is in regards to Tea with Milk by Alan Say. So again, I have my yellow to show my similarities and my blue highlighter to show our differences. Okay? And today, as we read, we're also going to be looking for linking words that show comparisons and linking words that show contrasts. Okay? All right, so follow along as I read out loud. In Tea with Milk by Alan Say, Masako was a young woman who moved from San Francisco to Japan. At first, she was unhappy in Japan, but Masako made a life for herself there. She found some things that were similar to her old life. But there were also many differences. Okay, we see here in our introduction, title, author's name, and a brief summary of what the text is about. Now, moving on to our first body paragraph. One thing that was similar was that Osaka and San Francisco were both big cities. Osaka had many cars just like San Francisco. Similarly, the city noises in Osaka reminded Masako of the sounds of San Francisco. Masako was happy to be in a big city again. So looking at this first body paragraph, does this body paragraph show us similarities or differences? What do you think? All right, if you said similarities, that is correct. So we are going to just highlight this whole paragraph, yellow. Now let's look for our linking words that show our similarities. So let's see here. All right. One thing that was similar was. One thing that was similar was. Again, the word similar tells us, right, that we're talking about comparing. So let's write that down. One thing that was similar was. Okay. Osaka had many cars just like San Francisco. Similarly, the city noises in Osaka reminded Masako of the sounds of San Francisco. So here we see the word similarly also tells us that we are talking about similarities, right? Notice similar. Okay. Next paragraph. Even though Masako was happy to be in the big city of Osaka, she noticed many differences between life in Japan and life in America. All right, so here immediately we see differences. So we know that this sentence is showing us the differences between the two countries. In Japan, people were surprised that Masako could drive a car. However, in America, many women drove cars. Another difference Masako discovered was that in Japan it was shameful for ladies to work. On the other hand, in America, Masako had planned on going to college and getting a job. So again, we see here in this whole paragraph, we are describing the differences between Japan and the United States. Now let's look for our linking words and phrases that show us that we are contrasting. So even though, we've talked about this one before, even though tells us that we are contrasting differences, Even though Masako was happy to be in the big city, she noticed many differences between life in Japan, life in America. In Japan, people were surprised that Masako could drive a car. However, in America, here's that word. However, oops. I hope you can see that. All right. Another difference. Oops. My pen is dying. All right, another difference also shows us that we are comparing two things that are different. On the other hand, these linking words should sound familiar. On the other hand, again, I'm going to remind you that we organize related information together. So again, notice how similarities are in one paragraph and the differences are in another. Okay. All right. And at the end, Masako found a way to be happy in her new home. It was not easy at first, but in the end, Masako decided not to return to America. One more that I would like to point out to you is the word both here. The word both also tells us that we are comparing two things, and if she's saying that there's a similarity between both cities, we know that we're talking about similarities. That is another linking word. Also a clue word that tells you that we are comparing two things that are alike. All right, before you get to your second read aloud today, this is what your classwork looks like. That is due today. You have 6 TDQs. Again, you do not need to write incomplete sentences. Number 1 says, who is the main character of the story? How do you know? Number 2 is who tells the story? Who is the narrator? And this question actually I'm going to answer for you in the next graphic. Number 3, how is the setting important to the story? Number 4, how does the title of the book help you understand a main conflict in the story? Number 5, what similarities do you notice between Tea with Milk and Grandfather's Journey? Number 6, what differences do you notice between Tea with Milk and Grandfather's Journey? So after you're done filling out these 6 TDQs, you also have these 3 boxes that you need to fill out for the story elements in Tea with Milk. So for the second read aloud today, what I want you to be thinking about is I want you to be thinking about the setting, the character's goal, and the plot. Okay. Where and when does the story take place? What does the main character want in the story? Again, the main character being Masako. All right. And the plot is what is the order of events in the story? I want you to list at least 6. Please make sure to include events that take place all throughout the story, the beginning, middle, and the end. So here I created a document for you of words that some of you may have written down as unknown words in our new text. And so here you have the words, the definition, and pictures of what these words are. So here we have bay, miso, drafty, calligraphy, matchmaker. Let's make that a little bigger. Trolley, gleaming, a telegram, crumpets, and transferring. All right, so I'm not going to read the definitions for you, but this document is going to be available in Google Classroom, so please take a look at it before you get to the second read aloud. Then I have some pictures of some of the cities that are mentioned in Tea with Milk, as well as Grandfather's Journey. So as you can see here, this is San Francisco. Looks a little similar to New York City. It's a very urban city. Now here is a picture of what a Japanese village in the countryside looks like. As you can see, very different from a big city. Here is Osaka, Japan. Again, very similar to a big city. This is where Masako goes and is shocked because it looks very similar to San Francisco. And then here is Shanghai, China. Again, another big city from where Joseph is from. And here's Yokohama, which is the city that Joseph is being transferred to. All right. If you want to look online for more pictures of these cities, you totally can. And I just want to emphasize, and we'll go more deeper into this topic next week, but I just want you to realize that the setting of this book takes place a long time ago. Okay. A lot of the cultural traditions in Japan that is mentioned in this book are very old. And so Japan is not like this today. And we'll talk more about that next week. But for now, I wanted you to kind of be able to visualize what these cities look like today. And this is also a great picture of what the countryside looks like, kind of where the homeland of grandfather is when he talks about songbirds and the mountains and rivers and things like that. He's referring to places that look like this. So my last graphic for you before we get to our second read aloud is this family tree. So I just wanted to clarify the characters in Tea with Milk are the same characters in Grandfather's Journey. But the main characters are different. In Grandfather's Journey, Grandfather is the main character. Tea with Milk, Masako is the main character. But we see here, Grandfather is Masako's father, who married his childhood sweetheart, who is Masako's mother. Then Masako is their daughter, and also the narrator's mother. Then Masako meets Joseph, and together they have their grandson, who is our narrator, who is Masako's son. So if you want to pause this video and just take a look at this graphic, that would be helpful if you are confused about the characters and their relationships. Again, just like we've been doing last week and our other fiction text, I want you to think about the story elements of the text as I'm reading this out loud to you. Okay? All right. Tea with Milk by Alan Say. From the window in her room, the girl could see the city of San Francisco. She imagined that it was a city of many palaces. And one day her father would take her there, he had promised, riding on a paddle steamer across the shining bay. Her parents called her Ma-chan, which was short for Masako, and spoke to her in Japanese. Everyone else called her Mei and talked with her in English. At home, she had rice and miso soup and plain green tea for breakfast. At her friends' houses, she ate pancakes and muffins and drank tea with milk and sugar. When she graduated from high school, she wanted to go to college and then live in San Francisco, but her parents were homesick and decided to return to Japan, which was their homeland. The daughter was sad. She did not want to leave the only home she had ever known. Once they arrived in Japan, she felt even worse. Her new home was drafty, with windows made of paper. She had to wear kimonos and sit on floors until her legs went numb. No one called her Mei, and Masako sounded like someone else's name. There were no more pancakes or omelets, fried chicken or spaghetti. I'll never get used to this place, she thought with a heavy heart. Worst of all, Masako had to attend high school all over again. To learn her own language, her mother said. She could not make friends with any of the other students. They called her Gaijin and laughed at her. Gaijin means foreigner. The woman who taught English conversation did not seem much older than Masako. Maybe she'll be my friend, Masako thought. But the teacher refused to speak English with her. She could not teach an American, she said. So Masako wandered around the empty schoolyard. Small sing-song voices came drifting from the classroom, chanting kindergarten English. She wanted to shout at them, "I know the words you are learning. Why won't you speak to me?" At home, Masako took lessons in flower arranging, calligraphy, and the tea ceremony. She did not understand how anyone could sit on the floor for such long stretches. "Why do I have to do this?" she exclaimed one day. "I'm not going to be a florist or a sign painter, and I like my tea with milk and sugar." "You are going to be a proper Japanese lady," her mother said. "All I want is to go to college and then have an apartment of my own. A young lady needs a husband from a good family." "A husband? I'd rather have a turtle than a husband." "We have hired a very good matchmaker," her mother said. On the following weekend, the matchmaker introduced Masako and her mother to a young banker and his mother. In a fancy restaurant, they drank tea and ate lunch and drank more tea. Then the young couple was left alone for the afternoon. The mothers prayed for the marriage of two good families. The matchmaker dreamed of the full fee she could collect. In the evening, Masako came home fuming. "Isn't he a charming young man?" her mother asked. "Charming like a catfish," Masako answered. "His family owns the bank where he works," her mother said. "I won't marry a moneylender," Masako replied. Masako could not sleep that night. "Mother is determined to find a husband for me," she told herself. "I could never marry someone like that. Never. What can I do?" First thing the next morning, Masako put on the brightest dress she had brought from California and left the house. As she hurried to the bus stop, the villagers stopped and stared. "She looks like a gaijin," they said loudly. "I'm a foreigner in my parents' country," she thought. "And they came back here because they didn't want to be foreigners. But I wasn't born here. I should leave home and live on my own, like an American daughter." The bus took her to the train station, and there she bought a ticket to Osaka. It was still before noon when Masako reached Osaka. She marveled at the city. She had not seen so many cars since leaving California. She felt as though the city noises were welcoming her. The noises of trolley bells clanging, car horns blaring, trucks rumbling, and tall buildings with windows like mirrors. Everything seemed familiar, even though she had never been there before. And most exciting of all, she saw a department store that looked like a gleaming palace. She went in. Once she was inside, it was Masako who stared. There were beautiful things to buy. There were restaurants and cafes and salons, even a theater. Am I really in Japan? She wondered. She walked aimlessly, whispering to herself, maybe I should. Her heart beat faster and faster. She felt dizzy and confused. Finally, she went up to the office and asked if there were job openings. A clerk handed her an application form. As Masako filled it out, she thanked her mother for making her attend the Japanese high school for the calligraphy lessons. In the evening, she sent a telegram to her parents. She was going to live and work in the city. She would come and get her clothes on the weekend. The next morning, Masako returned to the department store office. No one had read her application yet, the clerk said. Masako asked to see the manager. She was very insistent. After a while, a supervisor interviewed her. "Can you really drive a car?" he asked, looking at her application. "I've never seen a woman drive." "Many women drive in America," she said. "I see." He nodded and picked up his phone. Soon, a girl appeared and took Masako to a changing room and gave her a uniform. An hour later, Masako was driving an elevator cage up and down, bowing to customers and announcing the floors. She rented a room in a rooming house for university students. Her parents were not happy, especially her mother. It was shameful for ladies to work, she said. Masako did not tell her she was an elevator girl. It was not long before Masako became bored with her job. "Could I do something else?" she asked the supervisor. "You can stand by the main entrance and bow to the customers," he said. "Only bowing all day long?" she asked. He nodded. Masako returned to her elevator. No wonder ladies don't work in Japan, she thought with a sigh. In the afternoon, as she brought down the elevator, she noticed that a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. In the middle stood the supervisor, bowing and waving his arms at a family. Suddenly, Masako flushed with excitement. The family was speaking English. "Can I be of any help?" Masako asked from behind the crowd. "You sound like an American," a little boy said. "And you sound like an Englishman," Masako said. "Thank goodness," the Englishwoman said. "Tell us where you keep your hot water bottles and umbrellas." "And handkerchiefs," the man added. Masako told them, and as the smiling English family left, the supervisor said to her, "I have a new job for you." Masako became the store's guide for foreign businessmen. She had to wear a kimono for the job. How funny, she thought, that she had to look like a Japanese lady to speak English. The odd thing was that the kimono did not seem so uncomfortable now. After some weeks, Masako noticed a young man who joined her tour 2 days in a row. She saw him again on the third morning. He did not look like a foreigner, and so she said to him in Japanese, "Surely you must know every corner of the store by now." He smiled and said to her in English, "It would give me great pleasure if you would have tea with me." She stared at him. "I went to an English school in Shanghai," he explained. "They called me Joseph. Won't you have tea with me?" "I would enjoy that very much," she said in her very best English, and bowed as a proper Japanese lady should. They met later and had tea in a nearby cafe. "Well, Miss Moriwaki," Joseph said, looking at Masako's business card. "I'd like it if you'd call me May," she said. "Did you always drink tea with milk and sugar?" "It's how we used to have it at school, with crumpets," he said. "So what brings you to the store 3 mornings running?" Joseph laughed. "I worked for Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. I was transferred here 6 months ago, and I haven't had a real conversation since. Then I heard you speaking English at the store the other day." "What a patient man you are," she said, laughing, "and I'm glad you came back. This is the first real conversation I've had in a whole year." "Are you planning to stay in Japan?" May asked. "That depends," he said. "If you have certain things, I think one place is as good as any other." "What sort of things?" "Oh, a home, work you enjoy, food you like, good conversation. How about you? Would you like to go back to America?" "I think so, someday," she said. "I wouldn't have to be such a proper young lady there. I could get a job or drive a car and nobody would think anything of it." And that was the beginning of their friendship. They often met after work and on weekends. One night in the late fall, they had dinner at a restaurant they liked. After a while, May noticed that she was doing all the talking and Joseph was not eating his food. "Are you all right?" she asked. Joseph nodded but said nothing. As they left the restaurant, May said, "Tell me what's wrong." "They are transferring me," Joseph said. "What?" "They are sending me to another office." "Where?" "Yokohama." "No." They walked in silence until they came to the Kobe harbor. Finally, Joseph said, "Yokohama isn't that far away." "I'm glad it's not in China," May said. "Look, Joseph, I came here on a ship, like that." "You're thinking about San Francisco, aren't you?" Now May looked away. "I went to an English school because my foster parents were English." "Foster parents? You were adopted?" Joseph nodded. "There were 6 of us, all adopted and all scattered now, and all looking for a home. May, home isn't a place or a building that's ready-made and waiting for you in America or anywhere else." "You are right," she said. "I'll have to make it for myself." "What about us?" Joseph said. "We can do it together." "Yes," May said, nodding. "We can start here. We can adopt this country," he said. "One country is as good as another," May smiled. "Yes, Joseph, let's make a home." So they were married in Yokohama and made a home there. I was their first child. My father called my mother May, but to everyone else, she was Masako. At home, they spoke English to each other and Japanese to me. Sometimes my mother wore a kimono, but she never got used to sitting on the floor for very long. All this happened a long time ago, but even today, I always drink my tea with milk and sugar. All right, and that is today's second read aloud.